Hello everyone, welcome to Painting Crafty, and tonight we're going to do another watercolor tutorial. I live in an area where we have the changing of the seasons and it really is starting to feel like fall around here, and I thought what a better way to celebrate than to add some fall color by painting these simple little leaves. I'm going to show you how to do these 3 different styles. This one I actually put in a little floating frame. Doesn't that look pretty? It doesn't take a lot of time to draw or paint these things, but I'll show you how you can easily blend the colors. It's the watercolor paper that makes a difference on this particular painting. It's the Arches 100% cotton watercolor paper, and then I'm just using the watercolor paints that I have. I have the Paul Rubens set of watercolors, but watercolor comes in a whole host of price ranges, so I always say spend a little bit more on your paper and just buy the watercolor you can afford. Well, let's get started and I'll show you how you can simply create these little fall collection of leaves and maybe put them into a pretty frame, or would these make a beautiful card to give someone? Well, let's start the steps and I'll give you some tips of how you can draw some of these leaves. Let's go ahead and start with just a few drawing tips if you want to hand draw your own leaves. Now this one is a maple leaf. This is out in my yard. This is also a maple leaf, but this is a different type of a maple tree. So depending on what kind of maples you're going to do, this is a sugar maple. But take a look at what your shape is. You could actually lay this down and trace over it if you would like some help doing that. But the key thing to remember when you're doing a maple leaf is look at the structure, and we're going to start with a line that comes down the middle. This is going to be your center line. Then you're going to go ahead and arch off. So you're making a little V. So you got down the center in this direction here. Now when you start at the top, you're going to start with an upside down triangle shape, something like that that's going to veer off. You're going to come back in and make a hook and up, a hook and up, because we're going to create this width here. Now this is my center, so when I'm coming to each side, I kind of want to make sure that this line here is about the same width across on this side. So when I'm coming down, I'm going to come down and do a hook to my right. That's where I'm going to be taking a look at where I drew this line. That's going to help me determine where my hook is. And then here is going to be that little bit of a hook up and a hook down. Now let's come on this side. So when I'm going down, I want to create the line that's similar to this one. I'm going to come down and I'm going to make the opposite direction hook. So you're going to take a look here. These hooks should be about the same length. It doesn't have to be perfect, but that's what you're going for. Now this is that line that comes off. So this is where we're going to have our point again. And you can have a few little of these types of little ones. They're not going to be exact, like they're kind of they won't look exactly the same on each side, and that's fine, but as long as you have that development of there's your middle, this is going to be a little wider here, come in, and this is where you're going to have your hooks to the right and to the left. And we have these little branch areas there. Now we're going to be coming down. Here's this other line that we drew. And this is the next hook that we're going for. This little line right here, we're going to be having a hook coming this direction and a hook that comes back. So we're going to be creating these next hooks. So we're just going to go a bump, and it's going to hook up to my area that I'm making this curve on my leaf. This is going to be the same, a bump, and it's going to hook up to that next curved area down below here. This is where we're going to be coming up and creating the bottom part of our leaf. And then a stem. So if you can look at my leaf here, I have the same one. So I have the top, it's coming out, down, hooks to each direction. We're going to have the points on each area. Coming down, and we're going to do a little bit more here, and a little down and around. Though that's the maple leaf. The maple leaf gets a little bit, probably the most complicated of the leaves to perhaps draw. And then there's going to be little veins that come off into the center. You can determine how much of the veining that you would like to do. The other part that I wanted to point out is if you wanted to create an oak leaf, a characteristic of the oak leaf is that it is narrower here at the base. You can see how it comes in this way. then it's going to go a little wider and then come in again. And it has these little soft curves when you're creating your oak leaves, is what that one's going to be. Now there's all types of leaves. This one is kind of a little bit more of a heart-shaped leaf. So it's going to have these little dips and then little tiny little sawtooth edges all the way around. Now, for those of you who like to paint, but maybe drawing is not your thing, I do have a sketchbook membership, and that's where I have all of the line drawings for any of the paintings that I do on my channel, on my YouTube channel, and this is just easy to join. It gives you all the line drawings, so you can just go ahead and trace them and then paint. Today I'm going to be painting on the watercolor paper, the Arches watercolor paper. I'm going to give you some tips of how you can create these really pretty watercolor blends, and I'll show you that on this particular paper. And before I had some questions about what types of erasers to use. I just use a regular number 2 pencil when I trace my things. I do trace them on a light box, and then after I draw them out first this way, then I go ahead and trace them onto my watercolor paper using a light box. And if I want to lighten my line work, I use a kneaded eraser. That's going to allow me to go over my pencil marks and just lighten them without smearing my paper or my pencil. I won't smear it if I use a kneaded eraser. You can also use more of a polymer eraser if you would like. Polymer erasers are more aggressive. They may flatten out an area of your paper as well. So to lighten my pencil marks, what I like to use is a kneaded eraser. Well, let's get started. I can't wait to show you the watercolor steps. Today I'm going to be using my Paul Rubens watercolor. Use what you have. You might have. Watercolor comes in a range of price range, and it just really kind of depends on the cost, depends on the pigments of it and the quality of paint. I'm using kind of a mid-price range of watercolor today. I'm also working on the Arches 100% cotton watercolor paper, which is going to give me some great blending looks by using this paper. I'm going to go ahead and just wet my paper on the inside first. Now I'm not looking for puddles, but I want the area of where I want the paint to be, the watercolor paint to be glistening. This is going to be more of a wet on wet type of a look. So I want to put my water on first, and then I'm going to be adding the watercolor. Okay, maybe I can pick this up for you to see, so you'll be able to see how much water I have on there. Hopefully you can kind of see where it's glistening, but it's not actually a big puddle. Now I should have watered down, and I'll do that now. Use one of these little misters to go ahead and spray my palette to get my paint ready. I should have done that before I started. Now this is watercolor, so I want to start light and bright and then work my way dark. I'm going to be starting with some oranges and some greens. This is kind of just an orangish yellow color. I believe this one is called Indian yellow, or cadmium yellow is what I'm working with. And I'm going to be starting light and bright and then working my way dark. Now I'm going to be just tapping in my colors because my paper is already wet. It's going to do a little blending on its own. So I'm going to brush in this color. My color is wet over here, so I can pick it up. It's about the consistency of maybe coffee. The heaviest I want to go is cream. I'm going to come right to my edges. I'm not going to be leaving any bright whites of my paper showing on this one. I'm going to have it more colorful. Now there is my yellow. I'm going to go ahead and pick up some green. I've mixed it a little bit here, this brighter green. To make it more of an earthy green, I'm going to mix a little bit of red-brown in there because red and brown are complementary colors. They're going to neutralize each other, and I'm going to get just this really kind of a pretty shade of fallish, I'm going to call it fallish green color. Hopefully you can see how the color is just blending by itself. I'm going to focus mostly on the outside here of my leaf. Now I don't have to do this color everywhere. If you look at this, let's take a look at one of these leaves. You can see how it has some brown, some green. It also has some little speckled quality to it, which looks great too. So depending on the leaf that you are working on, depends on the color you might want. Now, I did find that the brightest, beautiful, I think the most beautiful color leaves are the sugar maples because the colors are those bright oranges and the reds. And those leaves are so pretty when they start to turn. But not all fall leaves are going to be that color. They're going to be more of this yellow and then shades a little bit of this green color as they age. I'm going to pick up some of that more red brown. And I'm going to tap a little bit of this in here. This is kind of like playing this color of the look of being wet on wet. I don't have to do a lot. It's just kind of creating the color on its own. I'm going to definitely need to let this dry and see what it looks like when it's dry. Watercolor always dries a little bit lighter, so you need to let this dry and see what it looks like. But it's looking great right now. All right, that looks really pretty. And I think I'm gonna stop right there, give it a chance to dry and see what it looks like. Let's move down here to this oak leaf. Now, oak leaves are kind of similar. They don't have necessarily a lot of coloration in them, but I'm going to start with that same deal where I just put my water on first in the area I want my color to be. Watercolor always flows where your paper is wet, so you just, as long as you keep it inside of your leaf shape, it's not going to go any farther than that. This one, I think I'm going to make more of the reddish color. I'm going to be tapping that brown in. There was a tish bit of gold in there already from the color that I had used my dirty pan water, but that's fine. That color goes with this theme, so I'm good with that. For watercolor, technically you should probably have one container that's clean water. That's what you dip out of to put on your painting. And then you have a dirty wash container. That's what you rinse your brush out with. I'm not so good about remembering to do that. I usually end up with just dirty. Okay, let's take a little bit more of this red, but I don't want it to be like a red color. So I'm going to pick up a little bit more of my green, and I'm going to be adding that to there to come up with kind of more of a rusty red. I'll take a little bit of that down there. Now this will definitely probably need a second layer because these colors are going to dry a lot lighter, and we'll see where my color ends up as it dries. Let's add a little bit more rust in here. And this is what they look like after I gave them each a dry. So I'm going to put another layer on. I'm going to be starting with those same colors again, mixed to about coffee to maybe about milk consistency is what I'm looking for. This time I'm going to be adding just another layer, the color on. This is where you're going to start seeing this leaf really come to life here. I'm going to be adding, this is dry paper, and I'm adding the color on as I'm going. But because it's watercolor, I'm still going to see some of that color I originally put on. I'm going to pick up more of the darkish color here, a little bit thicker, and I'm going to be laying that on. This has got a fair amount of water in it too. I'm okay. I could be getting some blooming happening, which means there's like these little dark areas of where the color dries uneven. So you get these very interesting marks called bloom marks, and that would be great if that happened for me. I'm wetting this paper, and then I'm going to be using my stylus to actually come in and make the vein marks for my leaves. That's going to add an interesting look to this. So hopefully you can see I'm adding a lot more color. But as always with watercolor, you don't want to get too dark too quick. want to keep those layers going, and hopefully you can see I love some peaks of the original color still showing, and you can kind of see where I have little bits of puddles of color there of that darker brown showing. That's going to create some of those blooms, or I'm hoping so. Now I'm going to be taking a stylus. This has got a fairly small end, and I'm going to go over my pencil lines. This is going to help create the stem lines or those vein marks in my leaves. I'm actually damaging the paper. It would be considered damaging the paper. I'm making a permanent mark in here that cannot be removed. But where I'm using the stylus, that color of my watercolor is going to sink harder down into those veins, and it's going to create that mark for me. It's a great way to add some mark work to your paintings without just using a brush. Now I can add my lines there. I can go, this is even the smaller line, and I can add a few more. This is up to you. If you get the tracers, I have it drawn simply. You can add a few more lines to yours to add the depth that you want to, or add the extra character. So I'm coming in and I'm doing little line works that have a slight little bend to them. So they're not going straight out. They have just the slightest bit of bend in them. And they're not exactly like straight across from each other. So I'm going and stepping them out in different directions. So they're not exactly next to each other. Whoops, I want it to be curved. I was saying whoops because this one I drew this way. I don't really want that line. I want it to be more this direction. Hopefully that makes sense. To have it curve in instead of curve out. That's the direction I'm looking for. Okay, and adding just a little bit more there. Okay. Ooh, I think that's gonna look good. So we're just gonna let that dry and see how those lines dry out. I'm going to do the same steps for this, and I'll speed the camera up a little bit as you're watching so you can watch this next bit of color being applied here.
Sunbeams crawling on the floor, bare feet touching the day before. Coffee steam dances, lazy and slow. Dreams still whisper where I go. Through the window glow, I see it clear. The turning world, it pulls me near. Moments quiet, hearts unfold. The simple story softly told. Books half open.
Now this isn't all the way dry, but it's had just a tiny bit of a chance to dry. I'm going to go directly into my pans of color with my stylus. Now I have a softened watercolor. I had sprayed them beforehand, so they're a little bit soft. And this is when I'm going to be adding a few little dots of color. So I'm just going to be tapping in little spots. You want to give this a chance to dry just a little bit, because if I go in too early, it could just kind of just spread all the way out and you're not going to see the colorations. But even if they do spread out and soften, you can always come back in and tap a few more. But this is going to add a lot of texture. That one was a big spot, but I'm okay with that. I think that's going to look great. As you notice in some of these leaves, they have just bigger spots and areas. Nothing is even. So I'm going to be adding, that's the texture I'm adding now. I'm tapping in between the two colors of this burnt sienna and the burnt brown is the color. You can also throw in a little bit of black if you wanted to, or even this umber color. Those will look all great with these particular leaves. You can see there's a little bit thicker of a push and a little bit heavier loaded on my stylist, and giving it just a kind of a little bit harder push is giving some of those bigger dots, which I think looks great because it's still wet. It's still going to kind of go in, but it's going to soften the edges. So what I'm looking for is there's a lot of water in this one. So when I pick it up with my stylus, I want to go off to the side where it's still a little dry but still soft. And I'm looking for those soft spots inside of my pans. So then when I put my stylus down, it's got a large concentration of the color, and it won't just be a watery puddle. It will have more of a color concentration, and that's where the dots are going to stick and create these really pretty marks. A simple way to add a lot of texture. Oh, I'm thinking that looks good. All right, let's do this one too. This had a little bit of time to dry. I think they're dry enough to work on the background. I'm going to turn my palette, and I'm going to be working more with a neutral background where it's going to be more of the umber colors, where burnt brown color here. And then I'm also going to be adding a little bit of Payne's gray. So I'm going to be mixing my burnt brown and my Payne's gray together and creating these really pretty shadows. I'm going to choose one side of my leaf. That will be the darker area. And if you want to throw in a little bit of the darker here and there, you can, but that's how I'm going to create the background. I want my leaf to be more of the center of focus. I'm going to do the background first, and then I will put my pen work on the top. So let's get started. To create the line work on my paintings, I was going to be using a micron pen that was in the color of a reddish brown. The nib size is a 0.5. I'm finding the 0.5 the best size to use on the Arches 100% cotton watercolor paper. It's slightly more rough, it has more cotton and less size in it, so my pens kind of drag a little bit more, and I'm finding that 0.5 size nib works really well for doing any line work on these little paintings. I thought I would try using the rusty brown instead of using a black, just to add a little bit more of a fall flavor to this particular painting. I'm just going over the letter work and just doing a tiny bit of line work around the outside and some in the inside of the veins as well. I decided to use some Stays-On ink in the color Timber Brown to finish off the edging of my paintings. I love the way the 100% cotton paper really absorbs the ink and gives this beautiful dark edge. This dark edge looks so nice when you're mounting it on a card, or when I put it in that floating frame, it just really set it off quite well. Stays On ink is a permanent ink and works great for this application. I thought this would be a good time to remind everyone that watercolor is not a permanent art medium. It will either need to be put underneath glass or sealed some way to protect the watercolor. The sealants you could use is a spray varnish acrylic coat, or you can also use a wax to seal your paintings with. Regardless of what you use, it just needs a layer of protectant to make sure that the watercolor will stay stable and not move around with any sort of water or moisture that might get on your painting. Once my ink was all dry, I decided to add a little bit more texture to the background, so I watered down some of the burnt brown and a little bit of the Payne's gray and did that splitter splatter technique to the background. I like that little extra bit of texture. These little paintings were so fun to put together and so simple and quick to paint. I'm hoping you'll give them a try. Well, let's take a look at what they look like sitting amongst some of the other paintings I have created so far on my YouTube channel this fall. I think these leaves look so pretty mounted on a colorful card background, and if you don't have a floating frame system, you might want to check out one because I think this maple leaf looks great suspended between those two pieces of glass. So pretty. If you're new to my channel and you like doing arts and crafts, come on over and see what I'm doing. I'd love to have more creative friends join me. Leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up. It really can help my channel grow. If you enjoyed this tutorial, here's a couple more you might want to check out. Well, thanks for joining me today, and hopefully you'll come back and join me again, and perhaps next time you'll paint right along with me.